Working. Hello, I'm Gabi. Just a small disclaimer, all of the research that I'm going to present here today is independent research. It has no affiliation with White Ops or the future company where I will be working. So it's going to be a deep dive into how big companies go out of their ways to basically spy on their users. And mostly when the product is cheap, you are the product. First thing first, as I said, I'm Gabi. They call me the public transportation hacker back home. I hacked the public transit system in Bucharest. After that, turns out I couldn't travel anymore for free with the public transit system back home. So I hacked my car. Turns out it knew a lot more about me than I knew about myself. I mean, go figure. And after that, I just started hunting for bad threats on the internet, mostly bots and privacy issues. That being said, let's find out a bit more about yourselves. Raise your hand whoever has a mobile phone. All right, seems like we still have some guys that are really old school. Raise your hand if you have an Android. Now, if you have iOS. Cool, cool. I have something for both sides, basically. Unfortunately, I don't have anything for like Windows, Linux, desktops, but it's gonna be juicy in mobile spyware. So, who knows what this is? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. How about a little hint? Do you know about these guys? I guess you do. All right. They decided to get a browser because that's the quickest way to access somebody's data nowadays. That happened 6 years ago. They bought a company called UC Web. UC Web has one of the biggest browsers in Asia, basically. And turns out that it's not only them that are in for the users' data. Raise your hand if you know about these guys. Yeah, those are Xiaomi. For whoever doesn't know, right now they have one of the biggest market shares, I think, in Android. In certain areas of the world, they are basically #1. Now, they don't only make Android phones. They were founded 11 years ago. They're called like the Uber of Asia. They make smartphone tablets, batteries, mice, TVs, Bluetooth speakers, selfie sticks, umbrellas, toys, and all of them send data. And to be honest, I mean, we're basically screwed, so they might as well make some sex toys as well to do it properly. As I said, they own the biggest market share. I think the graph is in India, and the black guys over there are their market share in that area. No wonder that they got banned at some point and can no longer push the products. Now, a year and a half ago, I decided to get a new phone. And I found the Note 8T, I think that's the name. It looked really cool. It was really cheap, like extremely cheap. It had a good camera, it was powerful, it had NFC, so you can do all kinds of MIFARE hacks, solid display. What's the catch, right? I mean, how can a phone that's 150 euros have so many features packed in? That's why I basically started doing the usual teardown process of whenever I get a new device, I start sniffing out the traffic in order to determine if there's something shady about it. And I rooted it. By the way, the root process is extremely painful. It takes like 1 week in which you have to use the phone after you applied for unlocking the bootloader, because it turns out that other companies buy Xiaomi phones, they root them, they rebrand them, and resell them in order to turn in some quick cash without allowing them data to the suite, without allowing them access to the suite data of the user. And this is what I found. Straight out, like, new phone in in a few hours, a lot of requests. It's gonna get a lot worse, just you wait. And this is done basically by not doing anything. So naturally, when there's so much data being exfiltrated, there must be something shady going around. And I can do a live demo, but I have the next best thing. I have a recording. And I'm just launching the default browser on a Xiaomi phone. I'm incognito. And I am doing some random history facts research, you know? And we have the first call right there. Unfortunately, we can't see anything. I mean, in incognito, they block streaming the display. And we're gonna get a new hit soon. You can see all of the requests. Another hit. And now I switched off incognito mode, making sure that I'm gonna be like put on some lists over there in Asia. Now, this is a base 64 that's being sent in plain text. And you can see that my search query was sent to their servers, just like that, in incognito mode, correlated with the MIUI ID that I have, and the MIUI ID is correlated with a real address that I use. There's no other way to skip it, basically. And in addition to that, there's all of my browsing history up to that point. Now, let's dive a bit more into the details so I can basically give the tools for everybody who wants to dive into Android research, how they can, to enable them to do the kind of research that I did as well. So you can see that they're sending this request over there, data_list. We have to remember that, to an IP, to a domain that's being registered in China. And that was the big red flag. Then the domain points to 3 IPs based on the location where you are. For US, it sends the data to US, for Russia to Russia, for the rest of the world to Singapore, allegedly in a neutral data center. So new phone, no apps, 34 calls to their server in 3 hours, just idling to a Chinese infrastructure. Remember the parameter, data_list, all right? Now we pull out JADEX, which is the de facto Android compiler, and we look for that parameter. You can see it right there, where it's being used inside the gunzip function, a bit higher up. Right here. Now, we can just do some manual stuff. Unfortunately, I'm not that savvy to automate this kind of research. I just went by hand from one request to another. I discovered that it was going over the wire, and then the data was being encoded in a gzip output stream, and then after gun zipping it, you would get this whole packet, this whole JSON being sent to China, which contained the visited URL, the network to which you're connected, the device info. This was the Android advertising ID, for whoever is familiar with that. It can be reset. Unfortunately, it's the kind of data that every ad exchange has also access to. So it can be very easily correlated back to you, even though it's allegedly anonymized. And a bit more. It even contained whatever the user was in incognito mode. So I guess to do the data sifting a bit faster, and the MIUI ID, which is right here. Now, in order to get the MIUI ID on a Xiaomi phone, all Xiaomi phones run what is called MIUI. It's a spin-off of Android that looks a bit more like an iOS device. Anyway, potato, it's basically Android, Chinese version. And in order to get the MIUI ID, you have to register using your mobile phone number or your personal email address. You can't do it otherwise. And they also have a block list for email addresses, so you can use 5-minute email and stuff like that. They really want to make sure that that is like your legitimate ID. It's populated inside the distinct ID field, and this even happens nowadays. And it's being sent to something called sensor analytics. We'll get into that a bit later. Up until now, we learned that Xiaomi sends all of the URLs that you visit on the pre-installed browser, your browsing history, your search engine history, your browsing behavior, because it also sends touch events as well inside the website for God knows what reason. And everything can be correlated with your real persona. And it happens even in incognito mode. Now, my MIUI phone had the news app. And I just clicked a piece of news, right? And of course, it went to China and it said, hey, this guy is looking at this piece of news right now. My Xiaomi phone had a music app. And I was going to listen to some music that I downloaded offline. And of course, it sent the name of the song to China. And it didn't only happen on my phone. Turns out this is a feature pre-baked into all phones that run MIUI. So naturally, I pulled, and this is when the fun automation kicks in. I pulled all of the binaries, like the blobs, the firmware blobs, for all of their phones. I used a Brotli extractor, then something called SDAT to image, written by a guy like really smart. I pulled the APKs and the VDEXs, and then ran some static analysis over all of that. And it was no surprise that all of them contained the same code that I showed you before, that was actually sending the data from my phone, from the browser, from the news app, from the video player, and the home screen as well. I forgot to mention about that one. The name of the folders that you make on your home screen, yeah, they go to China as well. There's no exception to that. And it's being processed by a company called Sensor Analytics, as I've mentioned before, which basically have a bunch of Chinese clients and no ties to the West. And they removed this from their webpage, but at some point they were bragging that they you can contact them for information about data on your website, like user behavior data on your website, even though you didn't embed their sensors. And I wonder where they got that data. Now, the CFO for sensor analytics was in really close ties with Xiaomi. So, like off the record, somebody is really keen on siphoning browsing data. But anyway, enough Xiaomi bashing. Actually, no, let's not stop with the Xiaomi bashing because I actually got something done. And together with this fine gentleman right here, we started raising awareness about that. And what can I say? Doing constructive discussions on Twitter with Xiaomi. We got Forbes to get notice of that. And a lot of other publications, including Android ones, and went through this whole scenario. I mean, they ignored me at first, then they laughed at me, they fought us, but we won. I mean, this is one of the cases where the collective let's call it the hacker cooperative, managed to actually influence a big product and do something. So Xiaomi was disappointed to read that the recent article from Forbes. We feel that they have misunderstood what we communicated. This was the laughing phase. Then they moved to fighting. Below are 4 certifications Xiaomi received from widely acclaimed international third-party companies and organizations. Blah, blah, blah. They started like throwing ISOs and all of the accreditations they had, like, hey guys, these guys are talking bullshit. It's not. Then Forbes might be misinterpretative of the facts. I mean, our users' privacy and security are top priority. They didn't encrypt the data. I mean, come on, what's that? At least you like do it properly, you know, and we're gonna see how this is properly done, like in the follow-up. And in the end, we would like to express our appreciation for research's engagement, passionate and constructive criticism. And we did it, guys. All of this for the enhanced incognito mode that you have to turn off if you want to stay private. And it's turned on by default. At least we put like a checkbox and they call it a day. But the data is still, and this is only for the browser. The data is still being aggregated from your home screen, from everywhere, and it goes over the wire, and everybody's like, yay, let's get Xiaomi phones because they're so cheap. Well, if your privacy is that cheap, then yeah, go ahead and get one. Now, I decided to do an experiment. They build a lot of devices, right? Let's get a band on a Xiaomi phone, pair it with the Xiaomi phone, with MIUI. Let's see what happens. We've got like, I have less fingers than the number of requests. A bunch of requests in 4 minutes. A lot of them. And it was going all the time, all the time, all the time. In addition to draining my battery, they're also sending this. Can you spot like what's wrong? That's wrong. All of the apps that I have installed are being sent by my smartband somewhere in China. Because reasons, I guess. They want to like optimize the notifications for me. They could have hashed the name of the apps or something like that, but no. It's okay. They need to know that I have Telegram, Zulip, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Wire. Now let's talk about somebody who did it like professionally. And it was a lot harder. I actually had to do like legit reverse engineering to bypass them. And this happened on both iOS, and it still happens on Android. Spoiler alert. This is Alibaba's browser. They have a tiny market. At least I can brag, it's the 4th biggest browser in the world, I guess. But in Asia, where this data is not that aggregated, they're big. Like, it's Alibaba, they have a browser. It's optimized for privacy. Powered by the CCCP. I'm gonna do another demo. This is on the same UI phone, quality stuff. It's got the Alibaba browser installed. It's in incognito mode. I'm going on my website, boom, requests. We just have to take the request, spoiler alert, it's AES, and you can see that they're sending the address that I just visited to China. I like that they're consistent at least. So this is also on iOS. You can see I'm in incognito mode, and they send the data, like straight from the get-go. Who can recognize this header? It's something zip, something. You gunzip it, and you can see that they contained in plain text the unique URL that I was visiting on my website, on an iOS device. Apple didn't like that, needless to say. They just went medieval on them. It also sent, at one point, the MAC address, or it does send the MAC address in some locations around the world. The email, it also sends the serial number of the iOS device, and a lot more metadata that, unfortunately, is kind of like common practice to send nowadays. It's got like the CCCP's eagle eye over here. On Android, the situation was a bit more complicated because I was seeing a lot of garbage. I couldn't recognize any kind of useful headers in the traffic analysis. I just looked some funny facts about China's political party. And yeah, a lot of traffic going on. Now, the domain was being sent unencrypted. For statistics, I guess, at least they didn't send the URL, but they did send the domain that I was visiting. In order to get the data from the AES encrypted stuff, I had to at least identify if the data was being exfiltrated. There's this really great tutorial on hooking with Frida on Android. You need a rooted device, and you spawn. It's like a debugger, basically, but for people that don't know debugging like me. And I intercepted the plain text before being sent to encryption, right? And it was the domain and the URL and a lot more metadata, like the Android ID, the IP from which it was sent, and all that stuff. This is the hooking in action. I could catch. I also threw an exception where I would get an AES, some AES data being intercepted, and I basically started going through these points in the source code after decompiling the app with JADEX. And needless to say, I found a cipher being instantiated and a do final being called on it, which does the actual encryption. And I managed to isolate the AES key that was being used. We won. Not yet, not yet. So I used that key, I decrypted the data, and I got conclusive proof that what I was seeing being hooked before, because I wanted to have proof that this was sent over the wire. I didn't want to get on the bad side of some nasty people for no reason. I wanted conclusive proof. And of course, all of the data was being sent to China in some of their IPs in the Alibaba cloud. Now, can you see what's missing over here after I started doing the usual Twitter storm? There's no UC web browser. at least for Europe. There's the Apple got really mad, pulled the browser instantly. Right now, you cannot install it on an iOS device. You know that Apple also implemented the policy where you have to declare the permissions, the data that your app is sending to the servers. They managed to circumvent that kind of like declaration, verbosity, by just not updating the app. You don't update it, you don't have to declare anything. Yeah, unfortunately on Android, they just didn't care. Google was like, yeah, man, it's their app, it's their data, they do whatever they want. UC Web is still up on the Android store. I don't know, maybe we need to do a bigger coordinated effort to stop them from doing that kind of stuff. Remember, guys, it is our duty to do the right thing. I am Gabi, and thank you for listening to me. And remember that rights are very easy to lose and very hard to obtain. So for our privacy, this is a fairly like modern concept that we have. We have to fight for it and fight all of the companies that are actually slurping our data. Thank you.